Hello and welcome. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have started the recording, and today we're going to be having a webinar that was funded through the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, Eugene, Washington PCORI Engagement Award, and that is done in partnership with the Foundation Building Strength. And there's a statement there about PCORI. You can read it, and you can learn more about them through their website. Patricia, could you advance your slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I just wanted to, this is Patricia Novak. She is a licensed dietitian, and she will be speaking with us today. And do you have another slide about the recording?
Yeah, why does it keep doing it? Okay, yep, there we go.
Oh, here we go. Just wanted to let everyone know that this program is being recorded. That's because not everyone was available to make the session today, but this makes it available over a longer period of time and for people when their schedules allow it. And just remember that if you're asking questions or saying your name or a loved one's name, that health content then that would be shared on this webinar is not private, just so people can understand that. So we really appreciate the generosity for our speaker being on our call today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Patricia.
Thank you, Sarah. Just want to introduce myself a bit more. I've been working with kids and families with special needs for about 30 years. And many of those children, or almost the majority, have had neuromuscular issues and feeding or eating problems that go along with it. Kind of going along with the other statement about permission, the pictures I use here, the stories from families I use here, they've all generously allowed me to share, because really that's how I've learned so much, is through my experiences working with families. We have an awful lot to talk about today, and so kind of my goal is not to be providing a lot of tons of specificity on certain things, but rather to be providing for you some tools to help you problem solve in working with other health professionals and at mealtime. One of the problems sometimes that we face is working with people who don't have experience in the areas that you're facing your most challenges. And so often you are the one who's going to be the expert on your child, or you always are the expert on your child. And so it's really important for you sometimes to take that knowledge that you have and kind of conceptualize it or put it in a context that you and your child can benefit most from when dealing with health professionals who can kind of help you on your path. So we can kind of delve into just starting, what are the concerns that frequently are issues here? You know, usually what we're often hearing is are we getting enough energy? Are we getting too much energy? And my child gets tired with meals. How do I maintain blood sugar? What about different food textures? Constipation, no interest in food. What about non-oral eaters? So many different concerns. So I wanted to start though with energy, because energy, or calories, is really what often is kind of the first thing we start with. Because that first year of life, as you know, you always see these things: double the body weight, triple the body weight. There's a lot of growing and gaining, and so this is often one of the first problems we encounter, and sometimes that problem can continue on. Often when you go see someone is going to tell you how much, like, oh, your child needs X amount of calories a day, or you'll read it on a website. And I'm going to tell you right now that probably most of those numbers that you're getting are going to be wrong, because it's really, really hard to estimate it. It's influenced by so many different things, but where we start is by weight and height and age. And I really want to start here because this is, I think, is one of the major tools you have to kind of figure out what your child's doing. So we always start with length. And the thing about length is we just want to see continued progress. And I love these growth charts from Sadie here because they really, really show just so clearly with some of the problems that we're faced with. Sadie was small when she was born, and you can see that she's below the normal limits. The limits are within those, oh good, I have a little pointer here, within this area, and here that middle line is our 50th percentile. And she was really small, right? And at this point, the doctors are saying, well, this child really needs to grow, so we need her to eat more, and they were contemplating a G-tube. And this is, again, birth to about 2.5 years old. So she was a small little girl. Now here's two older girls who are the same age, and they are totally different height. We wouldn't expect them to have the same weight. So when people talk about, and this is what her surgeon did, her surgeon would say, you know, she's a month old, 3 months old, and she's the size of a newborn. But you can't really attach it to an age because she's small. So if we look at her weight, and if we look down here, when she was small, but her weight was also low. And you'll see after she got her G-tube, her weight, you know, clearly picked up. But we are then going to expect that your weight should kind of correspond to your length. But the problem is we're kind of below here. How do we know if that weight is right for her height? And this is where Sadie's story is I think, most pertinent. Actually, those first weights, she wasn't too bad here. Her weight was pretty average. It started dropping down, her weight as compared to her length, which meant she wasn't growing as fast as she was gaining. And then look at that. She just was perfect. She was right in the middle for her weight, for her length. So let's run backwards really quick. And if you were just looking at her weight, you would say, oh, she's so thin. You know, we need to push more calories. But if you look here, if we pushed more calories, she would go above average, not stay at average. So kind of the moral of the story here is, how do you determine the right amount of calories? Well, you look at growth and gain. So even though she was little, she clearly was doing okay with what she was getting. For her, we needed to really consider her prenatal growth because she was little when she was born, and also genetics. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm not going to expect my kids to be eating and growing as if they had a 5'8" mother, so neither should your doctor if you're also 5 feet tall. The big things, though, for your children here that we have to think about is the muscle tone and activity and fat and muscle stores. So low muscle tone or hypotonia really decreases your caloric need or your energy need. And so does low activity, because we estimate our goals for calories based on kids being physically active and being running and walking and just more physically active. The flip side over here too is that our muscle, the amount of muscle we have in our body, really drives how much energy we burn. Someone who's got a ton of muscle, like a weightlifter or a professional athlete, is going to burn more calories at rest than someone who doesn't have that. So both of those two areas are going to lower the energy needs that your child has. The flip side is, if there's any type of issues with breathing, that will increase their calories. But generally, you may think that your child may actually need a little less calories than another child their age. So we talked about that first point, and a lot of stuff on the slides I'm not going to really, they're there for your information, but I may not go into a lot of detail with. So what we just said is what you really want to be paying a lot of attention to is how they're growing in height and length, and how their weight is compared to their height. And then you're going to adjust the calories or the energy needs based on how their weight's changing. How do they look to you? And there's some other additional measures that a physician or a dietitian can do. But remember that hunger is not always an accurate indicator if your child's getting enough. So usually if we're coming up with an amount your child needs, we're going to kind of come up with just an educated guess, and then looking at making changes based on thinking ahead, diet records primarily. So the diet record should probably be first there, and that's really important. You know, occasionally just think of keep track of what your child's eating, and then you can figure out how much that is, and if it seems like it's enough, then great, keep going. Always adding a little more, because kids always need more as they grow. And how will you know it's enough? There's this great website, free from the government, Super Tracker, and you put in there everything your kid ate, and you can keep track of it over time. and it'll tell you if they're meeting their needs, essentially. Again, remembering that the calorie intake they're going to have there is probably going to be greater than what your child needs. But it'll let you know how many calories your child's getting, if they're getting their vitamins and minerals, etc. You do not want to keep a diet record every day forever, because keeping a diet record really takes a lot of the fun out of eating. So what you want to do is to maybe choose a couple of days a week, a couple of times a month, and do it that way. Don't always measure your food, but figure it out. How much does your cup or your bowl hold, and then you can estimate. But you also really need to think ahead in terms of changes. If your child is sick, you may need to increase calories if they've had an increase in therapy or an increase in activity. One little boy I worked with him for a really long time, and weight gain was constantly an issue, constantly. He just wasn't gaining, and then all of a sudden he gained, and we sat there and we couldn't figure out why. And later during that day, the mom brought up how he needed to be on oxygen again at night. And then it dawned on us that was it, that his calories, he was burning, he needed more calories because his respiration wasn't where it should have been. And once we added oxygen, he gained weight. So I think it's really important to realize that all these things really can have a huge impact. Some other things, think about simple things in the diet that you can adjust. Just increasing or decreasing whole milk or some of the fats, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, can have a huge impact. The other thing that's super important to remember is that even though energy needs may change, vitamin and mineral and fluid needs are not going to change. So you may be cutting back on intake, but you need to make sure that you're still getting the calcium and vitamin D that a child needs, which is super important because your child probably has an increased risk of osteoporosis just due to being weight-bearing and some other factors. So you may need a vitamin mineral supplement, and that's where, again, that super tracker can be really helpful in letting you see what's being met. All right, so here we've got some ideas to think about if you need to adjust the calories your child's getting. But it's really kind of, that's paper and pencil. What we really got to look at now is other ways of energy management. And what we're thinking about with that is when you eat, how you eat, and what you eat, because these things will influence safety, stable blood sugars, reflux, constipation, just these GI things, and eating. So let's start with the when to eat. And this applies both for oral eaters or tube eaters. And most of what we're talking about here actually applies to oral eaters or tube eaters. They're both eaters, they just do it from a different place. So we really want to focus on small, frequent meals. If your child's an oral eater, active oral eating should be 15 minutes, a number of times a day. And you're sitting here probably thinking, wait, 15 minutes? We spend an hour at meals, but the majority of intake is going to occur in kind of a short window. We're going to talk about social eating, and that's beyond that 15 minutes, so let's hold that for later. With tube feeding, you might want to consider bolus if you can, or kind of extended bolus. And I think about extended bolus feeding when you do a bolus feeding, maybe over an hour or so, or an hour and a half, and then you have a nice period of rest between the feeding, and then again. Clearly, that's not possible for all children, but if it is possible, there's a lot of benefit to that. So we'd like to eat about every 2 to 3 hours apart. It helps you be hungry, and it helps in many other ways, which we're going to talk about now. Okay, so what else does it help with? Well, it helps in safety. That is the big key with eating, is we want to really avoid any risk of aspiration. Now, these are all signs of aspiration. Clearly, some of these are signs of something else, because food refusal can be a sign of many things, like reflux or constipation, or they just don't like what you're giving them. The big thing here is that last one, that for some kids there is no sign of aspiration. And so what you have to do is to make sure that you are having safe eating periods if your child's at risk. It's also really important that anyone who eats with the child knows these signs. So the other thing that short frequent meals is really great about is blood sugar. And this is especially important in times of physiological stress, such as illness, when our blood sugar, changes in blood sugar are more important. Why am I bringing this up also in a talk about neuromuscular issues? And that's because we store glycogen in our muscles, and that helps to regulate blood sugar, and that often is not accessed well or stored well in kids with neuromuscular challenges. So it's what you eat and when you eat it. So I love this little chart, and what this is showing is that dark blue line is showing if you have a food that's high in simple sugars. So this would be if you had Captain Crunch or a Pop-Tart for breakfast, you get this big spike in your blood sugar, and then you get this huge drop, taking you below where you were. As an aside, mix that with caffeine. So have a soda mixed with sugar and caffeine. That's even going to go higher and lower. Or a Coke, or a cup of coffee and a Pop-Tart. Or think about this in the evening too. Even if you had cake and coffee after dinner, you'd get that same kind of spike. Now that light blue line is showing when you have a food that helps maintain, that has blood sugar better, and it's a low glycemic response food. So that would be something like a whole grain or a protein. And what that does is it causes a smaller spike, and then it keeps that blood sugar slightly elevated and does it longer. So at 2 hours, you're just above, kind of the normal limit. So after 2 hours, you're ready for another meal and to, again, keep that blood sugar stable and slightly above where it needs to be, or slightly above your kind of baseline. How does this work? Well, protein, the thing about fats is fats also kind of achieve this to a certain extent because they slow things going through your GI tract. And so that's fats work, but proteins really are, and whole grains are kind of the key with this. Remember, though, that our meals are mixed. So if I'm having a bowl of oatmeal, that's going to cause this really lovely light blue curve. But if I'm dousing a ton of sugar in there, well, what will that affect it? So, but maybe if I add some milk, so it's not, we're not usually just having Pop-Tarts, hopefully. But this is just something to think about in terms of the choice of food. Juices, I really want to point out, are simple sugar, period. They are not good health-promoting foods, and they will cause this jump, even if it's a home-squeezed juice. The other thing about small frequent meals is they help with reflux. Now, reflux is super common in little kids, and it's even more common in kids who have muscle weakness because your GI tract is a muscle. The sphincter that kind of closes off the stomach from the esophagus is also a muscle. So if those are weak, then you're going to get more reflux. Reflux is volume related. So if you've got a lot of liquid in there, there's more liquid to just slosh up there and make it uncomfortable. Reflux is also positional, so that if you have weak trunk musculature, you're not really keeping that nice upright posture that may help facilitate the food staying down. If your child has scoliosis, which is, again, something more common in NM, then it also can affect it because the scoliosis starts to compress the stomach. So this is an area where if you have a good physical therapist, that they may be able to help you with positioning at mealtime. The thing that's really important to remember is reflux can be a cause of aspiration. And some people think it's actually more of a cause of aspiration actually than eating orally. So again, if your child has reflux and is having repeated respiratory tract infections, those two may be related. Or also asthma is also related to reflux as well, and that's something to kind of talk to your doctor about. The other thing that's related to muscle weakness is constipation, because again, your GI tract is a muscle. And both reflux and constipation are something that I think I deal with more than almost anything else, because kids no one, not even just kids, no one wants to eat if they're constipated or if they have reflux. Constipation just makes you feeling full. Sometimes it can make you feel nauseous. Reflux makes eating hurt. even if your child is pooping every day, they actually still might be constipated. If the poop looks like, rabbit pellets, they're constipated. If you're getting alternating bouts of kind of liquidy poop and small pellets, they're also constipated, and it's really important to kind of address this. Addressing it, by increasing fluids, changing the diet, more activity, those things could be really hard to change. And so you often have to turn to medication before you can change these other factors. Even if you push fluid, even if you change food, even if you increase some of the activity, you still may need medication. And there's a ton of different medications. Different types work differently. So it's not something to just say, oh, I need Miralax, or oh, I need milk of magnesia. You really have to look at how these medications work and what's the best choice for the issues your child has. I want to point out here that fats can slow digestion, so a lot of times, especially people making their own tube feedings, will pour a lot of fat in it, or even oral feeding to get more weight on, and that can actually contribute to constipation. And so you kind of have to balance it. Okay. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about blended food in the tubes, which really, blended food can really, really help reflux and constipation. And just know that if this is something that you do, or you're interested in doing it, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. There's all sorts of ways to achieve this to fit into your lifestyle. The benefits are greater family inclusion. Your kid could be eating what you guys are eating. Better GI health, especially for feeding those bacteria in your GI tract. And long-term health and nutrition. There are some risks involved, so it's something that is really important that you kind of know what you're doing when you're doing it. We really don't have time today to talk about these things, because that's a whole nother talk in itself, but I do have some resources here that you can get a lot of information. Food for Tubies is a great Facebook group and website run by parents, and there's a lot of information there. I do want to point out that the Complete Tube Feeding book was written by a gentleman who needed to be tube fed due to a terminal illness. But what is kind of amazing about this book is he really talks about his experiences and how he felt making the change. So I think it's really nice, because our kids can't always tell us, you can't, 2-year-old, it's a little hard to describe the difference, how it might feel. And then your local hospital may have some support. If you do have questions and you want to find out about a hospital or a dietitian in your area that may have experience with this, please feel free to email me, and I think I can probably find someone for you to work with. Okay, so we know that the when and the what we've just talked about deals with energy management, safety. It can help with blood sugar. It can help with reflux and constipation. But the big one is the how, because this is what most of us struggle with, and while you may be talking to your medical team about the when and the what, the how is what you're going to be faced with, 6 times a day when you sit down to eat. So meeting nutritional needs is really a balance. We've just really kind of glossed over the internal issues. We've talked a little bit about stomach volume, especially related to things like scoliosis. And positioning with eating. We've talked about reflux and constipation and low tone, and how all of these can impact how much a child can eat, but also that tone really can influence how much a child needs. And again, if their calorie needs are low, you may not be able to be putting the volume of food in that you need to meet their vitamin and mineral and fluid needs. So the other part now we're going to talk about are more of the external factors. And I do always want to mention medications, which I sometimes gloss over, but can be really, really important. If your child is taking reflux meds, those can greatly influence their nutritional status. They can contribute to GI infections. They can contribute to osteoporosis. And they can actually contribute to some nutritional deficits, because they decrease the acid in your stomach, and you need acid for a variety of functions. Therapies. We're going to talk a little more about therapies, but remember they may influence for the positive, how well your child can eat, and your child's strength, but they also can interfere with eating at times, because if you have 4 or 5 therapies, let's say you have 2 or 3 therapies a day and you have to get all these meal times in, when are you going to do it? And food preference and eating skills. It's always really important to remind everyone about food preference. You have food you don't like. Your child will have food they don't like. And remember, for most children, it takes about 20 times of introducing a food for them to actually say, oh, this is my food, I will eat it every time you offer it to me. So that's just childhood. We never know if someone's going to like it on Tuesday and then they're going to like it again on Friday. So our ultimate goal with eating is to make it fun, is to make it enjoyable, is to make it easy by mouth or tube. The best way to do that is to start with knowing your barriers and respect them. Is it muscle tone? Is it reflux? Is it constipation? If it is, then we better figure out how we're going to work with it or around it or resolve it. You know, sometimes we offer food to a child over and over and over, and I often think about what would it feel like if you took the food you dislike the most. So everyone think about what food you dislike the most and kept giving it to you over and over and over. Or think about you have the flu and you've been vomiting and somebody keeps offering you the same food over and over and over again. It's not going to make you like that food, and it's sure not going to make you like eating. And for kids, little kids, they have short memories. They haven't been around that long. So even if, let's say, the reflux is done or the constipation is done, they remember the discomfort with eating, and so it will make them often not want to eat. I've worked with a ton of babies who refuse bottles because the pain was so great when they were eating, they don't want a bottle because they associate the bottle with pain. The next is anxiety and fear. Fear is, you know, as I just said, horrible for both the child and for us as parents. If your child has a risk of aspiration, it can be scary to feed them. I've known many families where there's only one member of the family who feeds the child because everyone's afraid that maybe, you know, it might cause aspiration. And that's really tough on that one person who eats with the child because, you know, sometimes you feel like you can't be there. If the child is anxious or the parent is anxious, it can be difficult at the meal. So let's skip down to that when eating is less effective because that really relates to anxiety. Anxiety causes the fight or flight response, and we know what that is, right? The blood goes away from your stomach, it goes to your limbs, and it reduces hormones in your body that actually decrease hunger because you don't want to be hungry while you're running away from the bear that's chasing you, and that's where the fight or flight response kind of came from. Your risk of aspiration increases because you're worried about eating and you're not paying attention, you're nervous. Food refusal increases and everybody is just frustrated. So know your barriers and figure out what am I going to do with those barriers. The next thing to always remember, which is so frustrating, is that capabilities vary within the day and day to day. When you're sick, medication use. Some medications can cause dry mouth, some can cause appetite change, some can cause changes actually in taste, some can cause stomach problems, some can cause sleepiness. So you have to really think about balancing medication with meals. And tiredness, just you don't want to eat when you're tired. Obviously, the food offered. Now, I've worked with a ton of kids who eat like, you know, you worry about their strength, you worry about everything, and yet they'll eat pizza. But you can't get them to eat anything else that's chewy because they really like pizza. Mealtime companionship also, you know, is huge. And what's hard is who's ever the most frequent eater, the companion, that's the most boring, you know, often. So when someone new is there or a brother or a sister, they may eat way, way better. And again, skill and interest. If you're offering food that's more difficult to eat, their interest may be less. So, you know, you just have to be prepared of not knowing. What's helpful, though, is to have kind of those go-to foods, those foods that you know your child will eat it regardless, so that if it's tough, and you've given all the effort that you think is needed to achieve that, then move to one of these go-to foods. Because what we really want to do is to maximize the meal. We want to pay attention to what is working as much as what is not working. And again, often when I'll talk to families who are struggling with mealtime, they'll tell me all the problems they're having, and then I'll say, well, when does it work? And I get kind of silence because they haven't thought about that, because we don't. We think about what's hard, what are our challenges. We often don't think about the things that are working well. So make a list, figure out what's working, and then use that more. Again, the timing of meals may have a big impact. Dinner is usually the worst meal for families. Everybody is tired. It's the end of the day. There's, if that's the only meal when everyone's eating together, there's a lot going on. So that may not be the meal that you're going to give the most difficult food at. What about the type of food and the order of presentation? Some kids love novelty. They want all their food to be different. They love trying new foods. Other kids want it familiar, either visually familiar, texturally familiar, anything different they view with suspicion. Sometimes it's the order of presentation. If you're going to give something that's a little more challenging, for some kids that should be at the beginning of the meal. Other kids kind of get like a rhythm going, and it works better towards the end of the meal. And then the mealtime dynamics, which is huge, okay, especially if we're talking about preschoolers, because they're just all about control. Who is in control? Is it shared? Something as slight as giving each of you a spoon, or just letting a child choose between two things, letting them choose the red plate or the blue plate. Giving some control can make a huge difference. And then again, in that mealtime companion. So are you there as a taskmaster? If someone said they need to eat 15 bites per meal, period. Doesn't matter what, and you've got your hands on their hands holding it down, and that's a very different experience than someone who's coaching a child through. Also a very different experience than someone who's a mealtime companion who has their food there too and eating alongside them as a role model. So there's all of these different dynamics that really will influence the meal. Now these may seem to contradict, but they don't. Be adaptable, be flexible, but be consistent. Your child needs to know what's coming. So it really helps to have really consistent mealtime routines. They know that when they wash their hands and they sit down, this is time to eat. And they know what's coming. You also really want to have your expectations consistent. So if you expect your child to eat a certain amount of food or something, you've got to be consistent. So does everybody else. So it really may help with everyone who eats with the child. Like these are our rules. Maybe there's one or two, but this is what has to happen. One of the big things that I feel very strongly about is hiding foods. So, for example, not putting the turkey behind the preferred, blueberry yogurt. First of all, it erodes trust. Your child is expecting the yogurt, and then they get a mouthful of turkey. And it challenges skills if the foods are very different. So, for example, if you're putting a food that has a slightly different texture, it may completely throw off their skills. Your child's thinking, okay, I know what this is. I know it's pasta. I know I can deal with it. And then all of a sudden there's this chewy piece of meat attached to it. That's a totally different way that I have to use my mouth, and I may not really know how to do that effectively. I always like to think about, I love M&Ms, and one day I was somewhere and I thought it was a bowl of M&Ms, and I put my hand in and it was a Skittles. I hate Skittles. And it was like the most horrible experience for me. And I feel like hiding food is that same thing. Or you go to take a glass of water and it turns out to be 7-Up. That's what it feels like, and it doesn't feel good. And don't be worried about offering easy foods when they are needed. It's fine to do that. So we really want to make every bite count, because especially if we're concerned about tiredness or fatigue, and this is just a list which I'm sure most of you know, most of these, about easy to eat, every bite counts boosters. Now remember I said fat can contribute to constipation at times, so that's why I kind of bolded the nuts and the avocado. that those actually have some fiber in them, and so it's kind of nice because those add some fat with fiber. Most of these here are not just straight fat that doesn't really have a lot of contribution. Like, for example, I don't really put butter here. Butter tastes great, but butter is not really adding what I would like it to add. Where different oils like olive oil, flax, walnut oil, avocado oil, those add some really important fatty acids in the diet. Some things you may not think about, salad dressings or mayonnaise can add some really strong flavor, and kids often like it. It's a nice smooth texture. Gravies or different sauces that you may make, egg yolk, those things again all add nutrition. In terms of the dairy or dairy substitutes, one of the big problems with dairy substitutes is not all of them are actually dairy substitutes. Remember that dairy provides protein, calcium, vitamin D, and calories. Some of the yogurts especially have no added vitamin D. Most of them do have some added calcium, and some of them have absolutely no protein, like some of the coconut yogurts. So if you're substituting it for dairy, it isn't going to. It's not going to meet the same criteria. Also know that so many of those have a ton of sugar added because they may not taste good without it. I think that so you really read your labels. The powdered milks, Nido is a whole milk powdered milk. It's often served. It's often in the like Latino markets. That one's nice because it is whole milk. There is a goat milk powder if you prefer to cow's milk, or that non-fat dry milk powder is the NFDM. With the Nido, there are 3 different kinds. One actually has some fortification in it. It's called the Nido Fortificado. It has like some zinc added and some additional minerals, and that sometimes could be helpful. You know, also for some people, it helps to even take like a scoop of, you know, infant formula or a pediatric formula and mix it in if you're really challenged for meeting needs. So let's talk about balance of food. There are no wonder foods. And I say that because frequently I talk to parents who are really concerned about getting a certain food into the diet. And so what happens is you just get stressed about adding that food. I do think avocado and sweet potato, though, come pretty darn close to being wonder foods. I probably would also toss on there some like almond butter or peanut butter. Just remember, which I should say, that almond butter and peanut butter can be choke foods unless they're thinned. You don't want to give them straight to your child. But these are foods like avocado is a wonderful fat, but it also has the benefits, as do sweet potatoes, of fruits and vegetables with all of their great special magical qualities. Sweet potato is a vegetable that's got a lot of calories, and I know that we're challenged a lot of times with fruits and vegetables being low in calorie, and so those you can often pair with higher calorie foods, like the things from the other page. You know, you can mix, you know, your broccoli with some cheese or with some ranch dressing or some of the flavored mayonnaise. And then, you know, this is just kind of a reminder with the different colors that it's not that we need a huge variety of foods. We need a variety of food groups. So you need to have fruits and vegetables, but if maybe there's just 5 fruits and vegetables your child eats, that's fine, especially if it's ones of different colors. So if they eat a carrot and they eat broccoli and they eat avocado, maybe some watermelon, okay, that's a great start. And if they eat proteins, if they'll eat some nut butters, some eggs, and maybe some dark meat turkey, all right, you've got enough to go with. So you don't necessarily need a larger variety within each group. You just need to have some in each group. One of the things that you do need to be concerned about, though, if your child is eating kind of the same foods over and over, those foods should be organic, because the pesticide residue that's in regular food is based on a huge variety in your diet, and most of our kids don't eat that huge variety. So if, like, you're doing applesauce, apples every day, then you need to probably be getting organic to minimize the pesticide risk. The other thing that we really want to have balance in is balance in eating. And this is where social eating is huge. It's a huge part of our lives, a huge part of our cultures. So if it is a child who is a non-oral eater, is there anything that they can have small amounts of, or how else can they be involved? I worked with a family that had, the child had all these different plates and cups and spoons, and they chose that, and that was how they got to sit down and eat with everyone, and they did put food on her plate, and she just kind of played around with it, but she felt involved. With social eating, often that's from time out where you may have 15 minutes of active eating at a meal, and then if the child eats anything socially, great. Don't worry about the amount. It may help if you do like have your child have their meal first, and then when it's dinner time for everyone, everyone can relax and enjoy that, because you really want to reduce anxiety and make it pleasant. With balanced eating, you have to consider your overall goals, and remember the tortoise and the hare. And I say this, and remember it's not a race. And slow and steady wins it, though, and going fast may not get you there. You may need to prioritize different goals at different times. So, I think things to think about with this is, I think about this little girl I worked with who worked with a wonderful OT who did a great job, and that little girl was probably about 15, 16 months when they started working, and she expanded her diet and added all sorts of fruits and vegetables. She wasn't eating any, and so you can kind of guess what happened. She stopped growing because they spent so much energy and time on the fruits and vegetables, and she was eating eating those at every meal, and her amount still was so limited that she didn't gain any weight for 5 months, and that's when I saw her, because she hadn't gained any weight. So you really have to balance the goals. It may, variety and texture progression may need to be slower if weight gain is a concern. It's, again, not the number of foods or the different kinds of foods. It's the progress in improving nutritional, emotional, and health status. You also have to really think about how these goals interact. So, for example, if I'm saying, oh, let's mix in some of these calorie boosters into the food, but you have to think how that's going to impact the texture also of the food if you're working on texture progression with your OT. So it's really important to make sure all these goals come together, and I think the best thing I can recommend with that is making sure that your people you work with are all talking to each other, and that one way you can also do it is keep like an email chain going, or even bring a notebook, and they can write questions to each other, or you can put goals in there, and so you can share it when you go between people that you're working with. So finally, the thing we also have to find balance in is balance in the interaction. It's really hard, but you want to try to avoid always being the therapist. You want to be a parent, so you want to make sure that there is time that you can just eat together, have fun at meals without having to focus on the meal in terms of what am I getting in. There's been tons of research on how much encouragement we should be doing, and a lot of the research has shown that pushing too much pushes often in the wrong direction. So it's really important to find that balance, but that balance is super hard to find. One way you can do it is having some fun games that you can do at mealtime and having routines. So it's not that you become responsible for how it's set up, but the routine does. And that really, I can never push routines enough. It really, really helps, because this is just how it is, and it takes fights out of the picture and often takes the stress. So again, remember that mealtime should be a pleasant time, and really think about how best that can be achieved. So what we're really looking for is enjoyable meal times with safety with the eating, and that's going to lead to good nutrition and better health and wellness. So thank you. So it's question time. But please, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. And please feel free, if you are looking for a dietitian where you live, that you can feel free to email me, and I can see if I can find some. Okay, so are there any questions?
Patricia, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and I really learned a lot, and appreciate the time, the slides, and breaking things down. I had a question from you going back to I'll let other people, if anyone else has questions, to jump in, but I was thinking of one. Going back to the beginning when you were talking about the particular child looking at weight in the context of height and weight, and I thought that was brilliant. And also with nutrition needs, and that you can actually find growth charts online, I believe through the CDC website, but I think yours were from the World Health Organization. And so I just mentioned that to families because you can, it's helpful probably to, for yourself, track your children's height and weight, or BMI, which is sort of like a value of those combined. But also that you can also use our patient registry, which is the CMDIR, which is our patient family registry for people with muscle disease. And you can actually submit your children's growth curves, height and weight, and it's part of that, and track that over time through our registry. But my question for you specifically, Patricia, was in regards to, do you recommend using a BMI chart instead of either just height or weight for that reason?
So a couple of things with that. One is that the CDC growth charts are the World Health Organization growth charts up to age, I think, 3. The World Health Organization growth charts are the ones that are recommended to be used for little ones. There's controversy of older ones, but personally I use them exclusively because it's more, they represent the world, and they represent the world of healthy people, and ours are skewed more towards, it's more skewed towards overweight people, the ones from here. Height, so we do weight versus height for little children, and then it switches to BMI. So BMI is fine. The only problem with BMI is that it's weight divided by height squared, so that if there's any problem in the error in the height, it really messes up the value. So it's really important you get good measurements. So that.
Okay, and the other thing in regards to measurements is there are constituencies in our people in our group who children, it might be harder to get. You can get a length, especially for smaller people, but doctors may not be able to get as huge of an accurate length for height. Like if you can't stand up out of a wheelchair and get on the measuring for height, but one of the things that they have used is something as a measure, estimation for height is ulnar length.
Right. So I have in there arm span versus ulnar length. The reason I kind of promote arm span is you can use the growth charts. Arm span is about 101% of your expected length. So they're kind of fun because then you can still plot it on the charts, and you don't need a special chart like for the ulnar ones. So with ulnar ones work fine, or you can do arm span. So there's also a question here typed in and talking about Nexium for the last 24 years. Okay, so the problem with the reflux drugs is that you need to talk to your healthcare people about checking different blood volumes. It's vitamin B12. You need to check for magnesium. Well, you need to check your bones. You need to get a bone scan because what happens is it decreases the absorption of magnesium, calcium, and iron. So if you've never been anemic, then it's not a concern for the iron, but it can predispose you for being anemic. So since it does reduce the absorption of calcium and magnesium, it can affect your bones. The other thing is it can influence B12 absorption. So you should definitely have your doctor check those values for you. Scoliosis is only a problem if it's not corrected, because that may then be, making it more difficult to eat enough. So if there's been correction, then that's not a problem. So in terms also about puberty, the big question on puberty, you feel like going back to some of these eating points for preschoolers, because preschool and puberty have a lot the same in eating. It's an issue of control. And so it's really important then your daughter start learning how to manage it herself. You kind of can't start too early for that. So making sure that, you know, that she could be actually helping, that she could be helping with food prep, that she can be helping with understanding why you're choosing certain food over another, and also depending on if there's any issues with fatigue, that she just also has her go-to foods that she's using. It's important that she have whatever is the appropriate activity for her, and that if you can find some type of physical activity that can be lifelong activity. Often for some of the neuromuscular disorders, what can happen is we may sometimes turn from struggling with gaining weight in the younger years to, once growth stops, dealing with excessive weight gain. Excessive weight gain in any form with a neuromuscular disorder can be an issue because it may affect ambulation, because if you have more to move around, it can get harder. So really, you know, and that's something, again, you don't want to be pushing too hard, but you really want to kind of get into patterns and routines of really good nutrition and really reducing the intake of like those high sugary foods, those kind of high glycemic index foods that are just not really good for you and do add on to weight in a different way than high protein foods, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. So that would be what you'd really want to think about in terms of adults and teenagers. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
I have one other question is, in your general opinion, how do you feel that medical formulas stack up on that glycemic index? Because it seems to me like a lot of sugars and in, say, like a medical formula.
Right, so I am a huge not fan of using those formulas when they're not necessary. A lot of those companies have really spent a lot of time and effort marketing them, that they're really the end all, and they're not. They're great for convenience. They are great when you need them, but they are medical formulas, and there is absolutely positively no research on using those lifelong. They have a ton of sugar, and some in particular, such as Ensure and Pediasure, have added sugar over the years. They were much lower initially, and they keep adding it and keep reformulating it. Because, again, the glycemic index, you know, I really enjoy that, looking at things like that, but again, it's a mixed food. So I would just say, you know, there's recommendations out there saying that women and children, you know, it's about 6 tablespoons a day of added sugar, and for men, it's about 8, and you're going to shoot it all in those formulas, and I sure would rather have I don't know, I'd rather have a cookie, I'd rather have some ice cream than drink those formulas if I needed to. There are ways that you can boost things that they're without just using those formulas, or you can minimize some of their use. So I think you just really have to judiciously use those when they're necessary, and when they're not, there's so many other alternatives that can be used. But I really think, I mean, we do need to remember they are necessary at times, and there are different brands that may be a little more thoughtful in their formulations. So again, the glycemic index isn't that the chart is really nice to show the effect food has, but with a mixed diet, those peaks and lows are going to be different. They're not going to be as extreme.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions, either on the phone, speaker phone, or typing in more questions?
I just want to add one other thing, another question in terms of adults. You know, often I start talks like this talking about first is health and wellness, and then we discuss disorders. The point being is we often get really stuck in thinking about, you know, the diagnosis first and then regular nutrition second, and I think you should just flip it. You know, if you know the good nutrition that's out there, you know, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, minimizing high sugary foods, especially high sugar beverages like sodas and things like that, eating whole grains, things like that, you know, that's what's important. And then after you're doing all of that, then you look at the other issues and you say, do I still have an issue eating like this? Then you think about that. But that's really what it boils down to. And I said I started with energy because that's what's usually the most impacted. And, if you're choosing again, real food, good food, and then you adjust the amounts and when you're eating during the day, that's really a lot of what it boils down to. So I really, really want to respond to someone's question here. In that, do recommendations change for adults? They change with politics, but they don't change for your body. And there should, again, just health should come first, with just your general plant-based kind of, primarily plant-based meal. The whole My Plate, three-quarters of your three-quarters of your plate should be plant-based. And again, that super tracker I gave you, that actually has, as not just children, that has adults that you can go in there and put in what you're eating, and that will also give you all these wonderful recommendations. So if you want, more recommendations for just good health nutrition, that's a great site to go to.
And just FYI, she's going to give me the resources, and I will be posting them on the Facebook page so people can refer to them back later. And the handouts are also available on the Facebook, on our Facebook group. So I want to just thank you. Nutrition was an area that this community had identified as something they wanted to learn more about, and so I really, really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today, and also for all the future listeners to this webinar. So thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for joining us, and then we will finish here. Okay, goodbye.